Welcome to our space where talking about the inspiring things with inspiring people is what inspires us. Waiting for you here are the infinite possibilities that creation, collaboration, and connection have to offer. A universe where we see everything through rose-tinted spectacles that help us to keep our faith in the power of imagination alive and well. And now, let's talk. Welcome to this episode of Metralla Rosa. Today we are going to be talking with Rosalind Lyons. She is an art figurative painter and she has been exhibiting her work both in UK and internationally since the 90s. She's also have a very extensive experience as an illustrator, especially of children's book and educational publications. And her paintings, which are our main concern today, are an invitation to a fascinating encounter between past and present, tradition and innovation, between reality and artifice, and between imagination and legacy. Her paintings are also definitely inspired and influenced by the Renaissance art of Italy and Northern Europe, and definitely by the Elizabethan and Jacobean portraits, and especially by Shakespeare's plays. And I'm very, very happy to have Rosalind with us today. I'm also slightly nervous because I feel it's such a fascinating and out of my area of expertise. All the story about Shakespeare everywhere, in any country, everywhere around the world, we know that it's a huge reference. But we always also normally feel like you don't really have access to what makes Shakespeare amazing. And you have been working very, very intensively the theme of Shakespeare and taking that as inspiration for your figurative work. Please tell me, as a child, did you feel already connected with that part of England history?
No, not really. I was always interested in, always liked drawing. I think I always probably thought that that's what I would end up doing, some sort of creative subject. But not Shakespeare until probably I was about 16 in the sixth form, and we had a great teacher. So that really started my interest in Shakespeare, my love for Shakespeare.
Do you remember which play did you fall in love first with?
Well, we did King Lear was great because it's quite heavy going, but it's a wonderful. There's some wonderful speeches, wonderful poetry in that. I can't remember what else we did. I think
that's the one I would like to go and see. They are now having that one in the Globe.
Catherine Hunter, because she's extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. But it wasn't until I've always, Shakespeare hadn't really sort of been a concern in my work after that for a long time. But after I did, because I first worked in magazines. I worked in sort of graphics, graphic
art
design.
Editor and graphic
editorial and graphic design. So, and then I went back to university to study fine art because I just thought I want to paint, and if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. So it wasn't until then I became interested in telling stories with paintings. Within the paintings, I think I sort of started tying myself in knots. I got in a complete pickle during that period of study, because you sort of thought, I need to know what I'm going to paint. It's got to be something. What am I going to paint? And then I realised that was actually quite ridiculous. And I remember going on holiday to Scotland and thinking, you know, like when you're at school, they say, draw a picture of what you did at the weekend.
Or
So
write
yes, or write about, you know, what you did on your
what
holidays.
did you like more?
Yeah.
What was more excited about?
So I kept the sketchbook on this holiday in Scotland about what we did every day. And that seems to free everything up. And I just thought, no, it's about stories. And there was a story there about an island which was uninhabited, which had to be evacuated, and all these sort of folk tales in that area of Scotland. And so I became very interested in just telling stories with images were suggested by folk tales. And I was particularly interested in myths and legends and folk tales at that point. Later on, really, I became more and more influenced by the Italian Renaissance, particularly the early Renaissance, and some of the Northern European painters like Van Eyck, Hemling, and people like that. Because of the style of painting, which is incredibly fine draftsmanship, very, very beautiful. In Italy, I loved, and I can't remember anybody's names.
Francesco della
Botticelli, Mantegna.
Francesco della. I thought your paintings looked.
Piero della Francesca.
Piero della Francesca.
Yeah.
Piero della Francesca. There are some paintings of him, especially one with two nobles looking at each other. The man and his wife. That diptych, isn't Apart
it?
from the colors, the color palette.
Yeah.
I thought, oh my God, I can't really see the connection with Rosalind's work. There is this plain situation that can also add a lot of stories behind, but also a lot of details regarding the clothes, the faces. The faces are really, really... I wonder if it's deliberate that you paint with so much detail, because the more details something have, the more you need time to observe. Is it part of what you would like, the experience you would like to have with the spectators? Of it's just that you can't help, but you see a lot when you look at things.
Those brushes get smaller and smaller. Yeah.
Because
it's just I can't really stop myself.
I love it.
But I think it's also, I love the detail of those paintings. I love and the sort of the Tudor room at the National Portrait Gallery.
Yes.
All those paintings. And I love to look really closely just to see how extraordinary are things like, Holbein and those Elizabethan Tudor painters. The wonderful detail. It's I love that. I often wish I didn't do quite so much detail on the paintings because they take forever.
Yeah. Are you aware that the paintings are so beautifully made and detailed that sometimes you are not sure if it's digital or an actual painting when you see a photo, for example, in Instagram, because we are so used to get tricked by images that looks like paintings, but they aren't because of the filters or whatever. Your work looks so clean and is so perfectly made that sometimes if I were you, I would be explaining, this is a painting, this is actually a painting.
Because I'm really not clever enough to do it digital. But I think it's just that fine detail and that very fine kind of finish to the paintings, but that's the glory of working with oil paint.
Do you work with oils?
Oh, always, and it's just such a wonderful medium to work.
Why? Because you can't go back. Because it's very forgiving. Because
you can play around with it. You can do. I think I do have a deep hatred of acrylic paint. I really any students I was going, don't use it, and of course everybody thinks, not everybody, a lot of people think, if they haven't tried it before, that oil painting is so now it's just incredibly messy and never dries and all this stuff, which is not true at all. But it's very sort of organic. It's very, the colours are really
Rich.
They're very rich, and that's the word. And it's wonderful because I sort of build up layer by layer. Obviously, people use the paint in different ways depending on how they work. But if you mess it up, you can go back. You wait a couple of days, it's dry. You go back, so you can just keep working on top of it. You can keep working.
Actually,
on top of it.
I love when painters leave that thing that the Italians call pentimento, which is that you can see the lines of what, for example, if my arm is here and someone change it, you can see.
Oh yeah.
You can see the lines that were there before and the movement to perfection the painting, but you can, because you see the lines that were before, it seems like it's movement what is being reflected.
Yes, I know what you mean, especially when you see that when they sort of x-ray the old masters photos, and you can see the working underneath, which is really interesting. But I just love I love working with it. It's just terribly it's very flexible.
Do you also feel, because the inspiration comes in a big measure from the past, that oil needs to be the medium because it's what has been around for longer?
Yeah, I suppose so. I don't think I was consciously doing that, but yes, I don't think you could. Yeah, I don't think you could do that with acrylic. But some people do good stuff with acrylic. I just find it's just very plastic. It's just very dead. It doesn't seem to have a life about it. But that's it just doesn't suit me. Yeah, it doesn't have the depth.
It's very plain, flat.
Yeah,
flat.
It's things like making black, because quite a lot of my images, they'll have, as the Tudors did, have a sort of black background.
It's very Caravaggio, the color palette of your...
Yeah, well, I shamelessly just look at those paintings. I look at those 16th and 17th century paintings, particularly, from the British portrait painters, although they were mainly Dutch, but also from Italy and from the Netherlands. And so the colours, often I look to them for colours and for backgrounds and things. But things like making black, I never ever would use black out of a tube. I make black from different colours, so that there's all those different colours.
Because black is never just black.
And there's brown, and I use blue and brown.
Purple, sometimes you can see purple in black as well.
Yeah,
sometimes, like, depending of the light.
And all the colours, because and this, with oil you can sort of build them up, but there's all those colours underneath.
That's why it looks so elegant and so alive. There's a painting of you. I'm not gonna remember, sorry, the title, but I think I didn't even pay attention to the title because I was looking at the painting.
I have to do titles, but I don't really.
There's a lot of people, and in the background there are like masks, like Venetian masks.
Oh yeah, quite a recent one. Yes.
And then you see them, but you don't. It depends of where you focus, and that mystery. It's beautiful, but it also allows you to imagine a lot of parallel narratives. But I was thinking, looking at that painting, that's why you use the past, because when you go to another era to look for references, the approximation is always blurry. It's always less precise. It's always more diluted. You can't really tell. You can imagine. You can read books. You never know who told the story. As many said, the story has always been told by the ones that wins the battles. You never know really What's
Yeah.
the reality? Because you weren't there.
I think very much with the and another thing that attracts me to those 16th, 17th century, apart from the culture and particularly the visual culture, is the fact that it is very remote.
Mm-hmm.
There are
Yes,
probably
that's what I
millions
wanted
of
to-
historians, working on that period, especially Shakespearean historians and academics and historians just of the period. But there's only a limited amount of
information.
and material, original sort of material evidence from that period. So, and Shakespeare is a huge part of that, because he wrote about that period and also periods before. So, but there's very little material evidence. Even the art is very limited, because they were mainly portraits that were done for wealthy people, or very well placed people, and you didn't have those great big major works that you get in Italy at around the same time. You don't have the birth of Venus or Primavera or those things, because they had tapestries, and I'm not an art historian at all, so there's loads of stuff I'm probably wrong on. I don't know, but ever since lovely Henry VIII decided to destroy
evidence,
the dissolution of the monasteries, and destroy the art within most of the churches, just because throwing a hissy fit at Rome, we lost a lot of the sort of native skills, craftsmen who would have been making that. But I don't think there was ever, and I might be wrong in this, but I don't think there was ever that tradition of the major work which you had in the Renaissance in Italy, which was big subjects, mythological, religious, and but just
biblical passages,
exactly,
the stories,
but major pieces of work,
Yeah.
and obviously the frescoes, as well as the easel paint, as well as the actual sort of paintings. But I
What's
don't know
the
where I'm going with
scale
that.
of your paintings? I was wondering also that.
Well, that one you're talking about is actually really little.
It's little.
Yeah, but
I was thinking this is probably little, and it looks like something that must be huge.
Well, I was trying. I was just saying to David, I was trying to because I'm working towards a show, and I just it's having a slight sort of get slightly concerned about that I will have enough work, and so I was thinking I will do some small paintings. Actually, terribly difficult to do small painting. So I think a sort of I love doing big paintings that take ages.
When you said big, what do you mean?
Well, probably 3 by 3, 4 by 3, something like that.
Big.
But they're quite big. But mainly probably about 2 by 2, or sort of around that kind of size. So that I think I like to be able to get my teeth into the subject, to be able to spend quite a long time on the work. It's something that doesn't take very long.
What do you mean?
It just feels quite
take very
unsatisfying.
long?
Well,
Because I'm sure
it
it always takes long.
Well, I think, yes, I don't know. I can't say sort of time frames.
Weeks,
but
days?
if it's something that only takes a week, I might find slightly unsatisfying. But I don't know.
Because it's too
It's not
much?
really. There's no rule about it.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
But I also was wondering, just because it gives you an idea of the kind of painter that did the painting. It's not because you need a formula. Well, how many hours were you working on this to know how
I get
much
asked
should
that
it cost?
sometimes.
No, it's more because it gives you an idea of the tempo of the person, the way the person develop a work, an inspiration, the style.
I find I like to spend the time just to sort of, because you especially if I'm doing a portrait, they're all people, invented characters, portraits of some description. And I start off with a sketch, an idea, but taking quite a long time, you get to know that person that you're painting, that you're creating.
You get that relationship.
You don't. Yes, you get quite an intense relationship, and then when it's finished, weirdly, you just think, oh,
you let it go.
It's gone.
It's the same that writers normally say. They say that they create these characters, and they
and you think,
we have a friend.
We have a visitor.
They create these characters, and then they feel like it's someone that really is there until the moment they release the book and it's gone. But every night, every day during the period of making the story, building the story, they are living next to this other person. Okay, you are here telling me what to do, where you prefer me to write.
And a lot of it's unconscious, really, certainly with visual images, you know, because you're making this thing and it's developing, and then you just think that's done, I can't do any more with that. And it's something sort of breaks, and you just have you just think, oh, it's gone.
Okay,
it's gone. And you know, if it's finished and you're happy with it, that's great, but it is gone. I don't have any great sort of affection for particular pieces. Well, I say some,
is it possible?
But then they become something else. They're finished piece, and then they're put in the frame, and then they become something else, and then they put in on a gallery wall. Especially when you have a solo show, when you've got you've got all the paintings together, and you just think, oh, and they become quite new, because then they sort of have a relationship with each other. If that makes any sense, because
it makes sense to me.
There's a dynamic between
the stories,
and I'm sure all
not just the
people
characters.
who have a show, you know, whether it's photography or whether it's whatever, you see them quite differently, because, well, for a start, they're in a different place. There's different light and things like that affect it. But I find it fascinating when you put them all up and you go, oh, okay, that's what that was about, you know. But often, I think there is quite a tendency to want artists to explain what they do. And I think, certainly when I was doing my PhD, I sort of spent the worst. I mean, I will never write anything again, I tell you. And I didn't even have to do a very long one. But it was just having to explain, but also having to explain when you don't really know, when it is basically a very non-verbal and very intuitive process. And you just think, I don't know. But of course you can't say, I don't know, because you have to, you know, write something down. But it's being that definite, that definite thing, saying, yeah, that's it. Which is ridiculous, because tomorrow, that won't be it. It'll be something else.
Yes.
Because you'll change your mind. Or you think, oh, no, not
or
really.
You approach to the same stimulus in a different way.
Yeah.
To the same subject with a different, you respond differently. But talking about your PhD, which was about Shakespeare, I'm not going to say the title because it's long, as all academic research are always, the titles are impossible to remember. But I know it has the word ambiguity among many others. And you have said in other interviews that you relate to your inspiration, you find inspiring telling stories that not necessarily are very specific or about someone in particular, like you maybe cannot say this painting is inspired in this particular play of Shakespeare and this one in this other. That's not possible, because the way it happens is more free than that.
Yeah.
So my question is, how do you relate with ambiguity? How do you find that in your work, and why do you think it's inspiring when you see Shakespeare's plays?
Well, I quite liked the idea of, I'm sort of, before I started doing specifically looking at Shakespeare and Shakespearean theatre, I didn't like my paintings to be I like them the figures then to be quite ambiguous, so that you don't quite know who they are, and particularly you don't quite know what there isn't any particular place. There's not a particular place or time
or character.
Yeah. So and costumes were quite, the clothes would be quite ambiguous. So they could be from anywhere from the last sort of 150 years or something. But I didn't want them to be specific. So, but the ambiguity in Shakespeare, I think also,
that's interesting.
It's ambiguity of particularly of gender that started me looking at that, because there is a lot of my figures are quite androgynous, and so there's an ambiguity of sort of multiple ambiguities of time and place and gender, and so there's all sorts of things going on there. In Shakespeare's plays himself, the characters are very ambiguous.
Because at the time women couldn't act, because of other reasons.
There was part of that, but the characters themselves, all the characters are quite ambiguous, and I think that's why he's still so popular today, because there are so many different ways of interpreting the characters, whether it be King Lear or whether it be Oberon or anyway,
Hamlet.
Obviously
it can be a modern boy.
Yes. And
someone with
and Hamlet can be
problems
a girl,
of identity.
Very, successfully is being performed by women now, which is great. And so, yes, there was the theatrical device of the Tudors, of the Shakespearean theatre, where young boys played girls because girls were not allowed on the stage. So it was a practical thing. they had to. But
it also created a lot of controversy at the moment, because Puritans didn't like that, and many people didn't like that. So it also shows you that the same people that were trying to create a way out of a rule were finding at the same time obstacles, because not everyone was happy with the solution to the rule. Being the rule, girls can't play.
It was very sort of complicated, and that's probably why there's not as many good parts for women in Shakespeare, because he only had a certain cast to play with, and so
he only had that restriction.
But also it created quite a lot of jokes in the way he did. Certainly with Twelfth Night, you had a boy playing a girl playing a boy. So and all the audience knew it was a boy playing a girl playing a boy. So it was just to create a sort of comedic kind of device as well.
Amazing, fascinating.
But certainly I became very interested in that idea of disguise, and what is reality and what is imagination, what is artifice. And so the theatre particularly, that's what the theatre does, and that was what particularly Shakespeare does, is to play with those ideas of disguise and secrets, and playing with ideas of identity and the transformation. So, but within the characters themselves, not just the theatrical conventions of the
not
time.
The theatre in itself as a thing, but also inside of it, each one of the characters, each one of the stories. And how was for you being an artist in residence at the Globe? Was it this first, or the PhD was first?
No, it was about the PhD. Started. I've been working. One of my brothers, Bill, is a musician who is a specialist in early music, so music of that period. And he worked at the Globe as a musician and composer for several years. So that's how I first got to know about it and went to see it, because he was in something. And
So you
he
don't...
got me in to go and do a bit of drawing, but then more formally I got in to be an artist in residence. It was quite a sort of informal arrangement. I wasn't allowed to do everything I would like to have done. But I did.
Like what? You could be in the rehearsals.
I
Not
could
always.
only in the auditorium, in
Okay.
the auditorium. But that was fascinating. I could go and see the sort of rehearsals and the dress rehearsals. I went down into the store, the prop store, which was really fascinating, and the costume store, the special, from the original practices.
And the archives, the files. Could you visit them?
They have
Archives,
the library and the archives. Yeah.
Could you
go
there?
I could go there.
Wow.
So it was great, and so that body of work became the practical element of my PhD. But I had an exhibition there. But it was great. I really enjoyed it.
How long did it take? 2 years, I think.
I think I was there a couple of years on and off. Yeah, I could just sort of go down and generally, do what I needed to do. But I think the dress rehearsals in the auditorium were really great. Because you were seeing people sort of
getting into, when you put a dress on, it all changes.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, you could have been learning the words, but the moment that the character really embodies someone is the moment they get dressed up as the character. I feel like that. I feel like
I really like the Globe stage because there is that moment of transformation, and that's really interesting. But also because they have what they call the tiring house, the just behind backstage. So which becomes this liminal, because another theme in the PhD was about liminality. So it's this threshold between reality and artifice, and the real and the imagination. So they would be backstage, and then they would come in and there would be something else. And it's also between dark and light. But also when you're watching the rehearsals, you'd have some of the players, they would do a scene and then they get up onto one of the galleries, and they would be so a couple of paintings were just looking at actors who were watching a rehearsal of another scene.
Yes.
So it's just moving between those things, but also that the parallels with painting, also my images, which are, it's almost, I felt very much it was like directing a play, because you're sort of, or writing a play, that you're creating characters, you're putting them in a certain place, or you're lighting them, and that felt to me that's very much what I was doing.
That was incredible in so many levels and so many layers of information. I can see now why did you talk about, it's not only because you dress up, it's also because where are you standing, what do you represent standing here, and what do you should represent when you stand here.
And if there's more than one person, there's two people, that immediately creates a story, because it creates a relationship. So what is the relationship? And often, I mean, I don't know most of the time, but it's an interesting thing, because whoever, for the viewer, ultimately.
And you were one.
Yeah. But for the viewer, a viewer in an exhibition, you're looking at a painting and you make the associations, subconscious or conscious associations. Inevitably, you can't stop yourself. So you will have a different perception of that through than anybody else. So it becomes, always different, because your mind looks for associations, it looks for connection.
How important is it's for you fantasy, imagination? Because it seems to me that all your research, all your love for literature, all your being there at the Globe and being an spectator of all that was actually happening, you were literally translating all this information your way in your paintings. It seems to me like you feel like you are just observing. Maybe you are not as aware as I feel when I see your paintings. That there's also a lot of playing and imagining yourself, playing with dimensions of reality, the sense of, for example, no one of your paintings feels like reality, a photography of a reality. They always feel like a fairy tale or a story made up. Or so for me, the presence of fantasy and imagination is very strong. But I don't know how you relate to that. I would like to know how you relate to that.
I think that that is something I probably couldn't explain. I think it's just, you know, something will suggest an image, and then and it might be something you've read, it might be something you've seen, it might be something like one of the actors at the Globe. Now, I mean, the Globe project was quite a few years ago now, so I often, it could be Shakespearean characters, it just be something, it might be a scene from a film, I think, oh, that's nice. And it might be just the way something's shot, and it suggests a composition, because the composition is really, really important, that it balances. So it's not so much the content, but how you place that. Because like you say, they're very still, I think quite calm pictures, because, and a lot of that is being able to create a very fine balance within a composition. Because if you have something that jars, I don't know what you feel about sort of seeing paintings. If you see a painting, you just think, oh, that something's not working there, and you often you can't work and you can't work out what it is, and often it might be just the positioning of the subject. Yeah. So that is really important to me, that the composition works.
The composition,
that it works. But sometimes they get stuck. I mean, you know, and I will go back to the old to the paintings. But I collect a lot of stuff. I collect a lot of sort of things like there was a wonderful production of was it Shakespeare? Who's a great choreographer? Or, you know, Matthew Bourne did, you know, and sometimes you'll just come across these, and the costumes are great and that. So I sort of stole a bit of Matthew Bourne's costume designer, or I'll just come across things and I try and sort of make a note or keep those images, and then I go back. If I'm feeling a bit stuck, I go back through sketchbooks. But often I will go back to the paintings, to the portraits of the 16th century. Yeah.
And when you paint, you said that you like to listen to very convoluted, complicated stories, like Dickens, for example.
Yes.
And that was, to me, incredible, because most of artists, they love music, because music is so immersive in a sense of they take you to states of feeling.
It totally gets in the way for me. I can't listen to music.
Okay, see.
No.
Again, I feel the connection you have with the story, which means fantasy, imagination. It's not only visual, it's also something, the narrative is very strong for you. It's very important and inspiring, obviously, the story. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to literature and complex literature, not things that you can just don't pay attention.
But it is quite bad, because I can't remember when this started, but I started listening to stories. And now I'm probably about 10, 15 years ago. And I'm now at the point where I can't paint without having a good story to listen to.
What are you listening now?
I think I'm re-listening to something, Mick Herron. Do you know Mick Herron, espionage writer?
I don't know.
And he's got a new book out. I think it might be tomorrow. So that's Thursday. And so I'm very excited about that. So I'm re-listening to the last one. But I love John le Carré. I love detective thrillers. But I love Dickens. Anything that's got a really, really
mystery.
long,
mystery.
a really long and
mystery.
complicated plot. But yes, mysteries. It's got to be a sort of a thrilling tale. Yeah.
So you feel like you are solving a mystery here that someone else have created, and at the same time solving one in here that you are creating.
Yeah. What I think it does is it shuts off that bit of my brain, so it occupies
the mind. It keeps the mind.
That keeps that
busy.
Occupied, so that I'm working purely visually, and it really helps me concentrate. Because I find that listening to music interferes because it's obviously using the same bit of my brain or something. I don't know what the technicality is, but it really works because it just says, right, now you're working, you've got the story on, that part of your brain is,
so you don't bother.
I hate silence, but also because other stuff, and I start thinking, okay, what have I got to do? Oh God, I haven't done that. Or, all the everyday boring stuff gets in the way. But that is taken care of by John le Carré or Charles Dickens or
when I work as an art model, and when I work for portrait, it's so amazing for me because it's like people is paying me to listen to these amazing books I never had time to listen. So I feel I can be still, I can be perfectly concentrated in what I'm doing because my mind is so interested in something else that I'm like, shh, can you please shh?
It just takes care of that bit that usually gets in the way. But anyway, now I find that absolutely vital to listen to
but
something.
The stories have also to be quite complex and intriguing.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
You would say?
But yes, they need to be quite gripping for one reason or another. Not podcasts or sort of not real life ever. It has to be fiction.
Okay,
there's too much
that
real
association.
Life.
Yes, that's true. I completely agree.
Life.
Give me some fantasy, please.
Exactly.
Fictional worlds are the best ones because also you can go there, go out, go there, go out, and that's fine.
There was a really wonderful quote which I won't remember all of it, but it really struck me when I was doing research for sort of academic research, looking at stuff. By a Shakespearean academic called Stephen Greenblatt, and he wrote several books, but he wrote a book called Shakespearean Negotiations, much of which was really above my head. But he began, and he said, I wanted to talk to the dead. I began with the story, I wanted to talk to the dead. And it said that the things of, I wish I could remember the line better. But anyway, the things, the traces, because the dead leave traces. And the most significant or the most interesting of those traces are those in literature. I mean, he was talking about literature, but I think it could also work in paintings, which, and so although they're not the most, we get a better idea of the past through the creative works, through literature, through fiction and through visual imagery.
Even more than...
I began with a desire to talk to the dead. That's what he said. I've just remembered.
And anything else happened?
This is a formal academic book. It's not fiction. But he was just talking about how those characters
took him to do that.
He because that's what inspired his sort of research into Shakespeare and to the writers of the past, I suppose.
And coming back to the ambiguity present in your work, also, do you work with models? Because I also think sometimes you use your own, you in the past you have used your kids, your children.
My daughter, yeah.
Your daughter, only your daughter?
Mainly my daughter.
Mainly.
I did get my son in to do hands or something.
Well, she's an actress.
He was never terribly
keen, happy.
but he wanted. She was
happier than he would have been.
She still does. Yeah.
So I thought you were taking both of them to model for you, and I was thinking that looking for that kind of androgynous look, obviously kids help a lot because they are like, kids can be any sex, honestly. It's just
yes, and particularly when I think that's interesting when you're talking about the boys playing girls in the Shakespearean theatre, because they're at a point where they could be either, because there is that
especially
transition,
when they are arriving
into puberty or whatever, because they haven't got quite not quite grown.
Exactly.
So but also I just really use models not for.
Do you work with
not
models?
for as a likeness? No. I just use my family. They're free. Heavens.
I don't have to pay.
Exactly. But really, it's and my nephews as well get roped in every now and then. But it's really for not as a likeness, but just to think, oh, what does a hand look like if it's doing that? What does a face look like if it's doing that? I don't want. I don't do portraits as such. They are quite idealized faces, which I think makes them more ambiguous as well, because they're not, you know, I think they look quite lifelike. It's almost like a puppet or a mannequin. They look really lifelike, but they're not quite. I think I would like them to be more sinister, I think.
They are. You have succeeded.
Do you think? I'm really pleased, because I think it is that idea that they look, and you just think, you know, that you would look at it and to think,
there's something sinister, in my opinion, because
slightly unsettling, at least. Yes.
And because there's something that tends to be like a series of repetition. Like most of the faces in your paintings, it's true that they are different, but it's true that they also could look alike, one to the other.
Yeah.
And because I have been paying attention, and they are different. They are different, but they also could be the same face. And this allowed me to ask you, many people, they say, I don't know who invented this or started saying this. I think it was Oscar Wilde, that most of paintings, they paint themselves. And as an art model, I have talked with other models that they say it's true. People they just paint their faces. They They just draw their own faces. And I'm like, well, sometimes it can happen. Is the face you have seen more? Is the face you relate in a more unconscious and strong way? Do you see your face in your paintings? Do you think you do that?
I don't, but I'm probably not the person to ask. So
you cannot be detached enough to know, probably.
Exactly. No,
have someone ever told you paint you?
No, but they do sometimes say, oh, that's Grace, which is my daughter, so there might be a likeness there. So but usually I try, and even though I might use her as a model, I make sure I make some changes so it isn't her, because I don't want them to be anybody.
You don't want, and also, to protect also probably your own. But no, maybe the reasons are more because
she'd probably be fine with it. Yeah,
you just don't want it to be anyone in particular. And obviously, you have an interest, a fascination for costumes and clothes and fabrics, and so I guess you also researching books that are about clothes and because you're it's not, you can see that there's a lot of detail in the clothes of your characters, and also quite correct, historically speaking, even if you just said that you don't mind as much.
I got sort of, I think that it's quite interesting to talk about authenticity, and I looked at that quite a lot, because I suddenly found myself thinking, oh no, I can't do that rough like that, or I can't do that like that, because would that be right? And then I just thought, hang on, I think you're getting a little bit too obsessed with it because I mean
to descriptive of reality.
To think, I can't do that sleeve or something with that pattern. But yes, I look at those a lot. There's a great costume historian researcher who's now sadly died, Janet Arnold, who was a very famous costume researcher, costume historian, and then there was Jenny Tiramani at the Globe as well. They did a lot of that. A lot of people have done, and Janet Arnold produced a couple of wonderful books which has had her drawings of original costume examples, but also there were examples of paintings, examples of actual surviving costumes and roughs and part of costumes and things like that. They're really fascinating. So I look at those a lot. But again, I go back to the paintings, and I think I want to be quite accurate because it's sort of interesting. It's just really fascinating to find out about how all these extraordinary things were put together, but also because I want the people, the portraits, the characters to be credible. So to me, it's sort of important that they look like they might have stepped out of the 17th century. I don't really know why, because obviously I'm a contemporary painter, but I'm sort of obsessed with that period. But to me, they need to have substance. They need to have credibility.
Yeah,
I couldn't explain why, but that's
just
the
ones you do with the masks.
Oh, I love masks. Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
and they look a bit Venetian style.
Yeah,
and it's lovely also because it could be a modern makeup. It could be someone in these days dressing up as another era.
Yeah.
And
or it could be a theatrical performer. Yeah. Exactly.
Wearing a mask, it could be more like makeup, suggestion of facial makeup.
You could have quite a lot of fun with those because there's not, I mean, apart from the Commedia dell'arte sort of examples, there's not a lot of, you don't kind of see Elizabethan portraits with somebody wearing a mask. There are some drawings of where they used to have, the big celebrations, the mask, which is MASQE, the big sort of festival things they had. And there are some indications of that, but actually you could just have some fun with those and sort of make them up. But sometimes it's quite nice doing the fairies because they really are, it's open, you don't feel the need to be, talk about authentic costume or anything because I just look at often just make those up, or again look at somebody like Matthew Bourne or somebody like that, theatrical costumes.
Do you think that clothes and accessories and visual elements that surround you and expose your personality are somehow making you more nude than an actual nude? I'm asking you this because sometimes people, when you, for example, model without clothing, they tend to believe that that's your more sincere version, more authentic version, because you have nothing on you. But sometimes I feel like I tell much more about myself when I dress up. I show you much more who I really am when I have the opportunity to choose the colors, what I'm going to have my hair, how I'm going to have my hair, what I'm going to wear, because that's me. That's me saying, this is what I like. This is how I am. This is how I want to be seen.
And expressing yourself.
And I'm expressing a huge part of identity just with with dressing something. So I have always been with this idea in my head, and this allows me to ask you, do you think that because your characters have all these things, they are not less out, the authenticity is even more more present, more they are I don't know how to say this.
Well, through the clothes that they
Yes.
wear.
Yes.
I think in my paintings, I'm really I'm not really expressing anything. Well, not consciously. I look at pattern. I'm just looking at the visual effect of decoration and pattern, extraordinary sort of intricacy and thing. What I love about the Tudor portraits particularly is that the sitter, the subject, almost becomes completely overwhelmed by the clothes that they're wearing. I don't think it says anything about their character. I think it's all about status, because individual character was of no interest to anybody, especially for the women.
Yeah.
You know.
And also they weren't choosing really. But in the case of the Queen, for example, Elizabeth, you feel the character. Even if she has these enormous
you
things.
feel the power, but also we all know, well, you know, a lot of people know her reputation, which was an extraordinary and very powerful, very strong woman. You know, not least because she managed to survive that long. But still, a lot of that is about turning her into a sort of icon, with the massive sleeves, with standing on a globe, with the unbelievably huge sort of ruffs and the jewels and everything. I mean, she's just dripping. I mean, nobody could really, you can't believe she can actually move in that. But that's all part of the PR. I mean, that's what she had to be seen to be like that. And to a lesser extent, a lot of the nobility in those portraits that we all recognise, it's not about them as individuals. It's about them of status. It's got their coat of arms. It's got loads of jewelry, you know, to indicate that they can afford that. So, and an awful lot of the paintings as well, particularly of the Queen, but other sort of major people in major positions at the time, they would be copied again and again and again. So you can imagine what might have been quite a fairly good likeness of somebody, but you'd have to be careful with the Queen, because you've got to make her look good, because you could end up in the Tower anyway. But they were copied and copied and copied and copied again. And so by the time it'd been copied 10 times, because they had to be distributed, so by the time they'd been copied, that 10th copy wouldn't probably bear any resemblance to the original one. So they're not likenesses they're not portraits in the way that we would see them now.
It's a portrait of a status.
Yeah,
of a position in society.
It's a likeness. It's an image of the person, but it isn't.
And in your case, in your characters, in your paintings, is they choose what they want to.
So you're presenting somebody, but so
do you feel your characters?
I don't know who they
show their personality through their clothes.
Their personality, possibly, but it's
I think
not.
They do.
Yeah. Oh well, there you are. You know, you've taken that from it. That's great. But I don't think I think about that. That's something I will think. I will have to think about. Unless I have chosen a particular. I mean, doing one of Puck at the moment, but that's quite unusual to be so specific about a character. But it's pretty obvious.
Which one are you doing at the moment?
Puck. He's the fairy in Midsummer Night's Dream. He's Oberon's fairy. Do you know the play? He's great, Puck. He's quite naughty.
Oh, I can't wait. I want to see that. But before talking about the exhibition you're going to have soon, I would like to also ask you about your work as an illustrator. Do you think, do you still do some illustration for children book?
Occasionally, yeah.
Did you enjoy that facet of your work?
Yeah, I did quite a lot several years ago, but then didn't do anything for ages. And then I was working part-time at a publisher's, and it came up that I could, mainly I was sort of doing editorial stuff, but I started doing some more illustrative in-house illustrating, and I still do. There's one author who I sort of do illustration every year or two for the books that she comes. No, they're quite fun, and it's quite an interesting discipline, because it is very different from the other work.
How free are you when you do that kind of work? For example, they tell you, well, this should be there should be a drawing for this page, and
sometimes it depends who you're working with. Sometimes I work that out myself. Sometimes I'm told exactly
what they want.
That's quite nice though.
Yes. You
so
don't
do
need
that again.
You don't
Okay,
need Dickens. You can just go and follow instructions.
I have to sort of,
to silence your mind.
Come up with it all myself. I have just get told what to do. That's quite fun. But it's an entirely different discipline, because it's about, you have this space and you have these words and you have to make that picture
and those works
work together.
Space
it needs
for
to
everything.
enhance that text. So it is a very different discipline. But I do enjoy.
And
doing
when you
it.
actually do the art, you do also paintings. Is also with oils, or do you use different mediums?
Yes,
It's all.
I don't think I'm any good at anything else.
They should pay you a lot.
It's my fault. I probably could use other things if I was any good at them, but I don't. I think I'd have to do a lot of practice to work with other media.
And are you allowed to sell, for example, the final art of each drawing?
I could, because they, obviously the copyright belongs to me, but I don't think I would. No, it's not.
It's not.
I
think it's interesting to have a final art of one of your illustrations. Instead of a painting, maybe it's really interesting. I think
it's probably too different. It's probably too different, so it might just sort of confuse.
Have you done Shakespeare for children books? Right.
I did one. I did one, King Lear.
King Lear.
Yeah. They changed the ending.
What do you mean? They changed the story.
Yeah.
You didn't like that.
I was thinking, hang on a minute.
You didn't like that.
I think they were trying to make it more palatable for children, which I personally feel is completely ridiculous. But
patronizing also.
Yeah.
Why children need to be?
Because the fool who disappears and you find out that he's hung himself or been hanged anyway.
Shakespeare is not happy.
No, and that's a brutal play. But tough. Get used to it. And so, and suddenly in this, I got to the last illustration, and the fool pops up, and I think, hang on a minute, you died at the end of the scene, whatever, but not according to this.
I think they would have sell much more copies with the original story. It's funny, but children love dark stories. They love it.
I mean, if you ever read Grimm's fairy tales, the originals, they're horrific.
They need to prepare them.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think is life?
Yeah, life's horrible.
I remember my daughter. When I wanted to capture her attention, I started like, who had a terrible accident, but not talking with her, with someone, and she was like, who?
Yeah,
and I was like, now I have your attention.
I know.
But you need to use your cards wisely. And so now you are mainly concentrating in your paintings and your artistic career, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to have an exhibition soon.
Yes.
I think you're nervous. You don't want to talk about that.
Well, I've got to do it, so
yes, please
I've got to do it.
Please do.
I had a show 3 years ago at the Foss Gallery in Stow-on-the-Wold. I don't know if you know, it's lovely. And so I'm going back there.
Okay.
So it's a beautiful space and a lovely town. So it's always nice to go there. And that opens on the 2nd of October.
Great. That's great. And you already have everything done? Are you working on it?
Don't ask me that.
See, this is the part that gets complicated.
Of course I haven't got everything done, don't.
We all do that. Procrastination and leaving everything for the last minute is just a human condition.
I know. I really wish I was an abstract expressionist at the moment.
Yes.
Well, quite often, actually.
But you cannot do that.
But
Don't disappoint us.
I love that work.
Don't.
So if only I did that, I might be able to produce rather more.
Well, I wish you all the best. Best luck with that exhibition, and please keep going what you're doing. It's amazing. We
Yes.
found you by chance on thank you to wonderful Instagram, but your work is really, really captivating, fascinating. It makes me feel like dreaming is possible and it's free. So thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Can I kiss you?
You can.
Mwah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for staying with us this far. I hope you enjoyed that. And if that's the case, I would like to suggest you to enjoy the rest of our content. Also, if you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to our channel and hit the bell so you can get notifications every time we share a new episode with all of you.